if we say something that you don't know the definition of, just raise your hand.
This way.
This way. Jeez, you can tell that I.
Give us a D.
A D.
But honestly, if you're pointing up one finger, we'll probably
Pointing up
just
one
assume that that's
finger
what
will
you mean.
probably just.
Let us know that you'd like us to define something that was very recently said.
Exactly. Okay. So yeah, that's it for the housekeeping. So let's just start by taking a breath. Center yourself, and all right. So let's start with introductions. So I'd like each of our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves, say their name, the pronouns, and the thing that they are most interested in discussing today. We're starting with Kate.
I am Kit. I use they and them pronouns. I think I am most interested in discussing how non-binary people in the Larp community have to create their own spaces and how creators can make it easier for us to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. My name is Kim. I go by they, them, or I am blanking for some reason. It's really ridiculous. So I usually use they, them pronouns. I never accept she, just as a reference. And I want to talk about representation and also how people realized that they were non-binary and what Larp did for them in that sphere.
I am Books. I use they, them, and similarly, I want to talk about Larp as a tool for self-discovery and ways that we can, in our Larps and Larp communities, facilitate people going on those journeys and also making allowances for people to experiment with potential identities that they may be trying on in temporary contexts.
I'm Susan. I use any pronouns. It's okay. I don't. It doesn't actually matter to me personally. And I want to talk about designing Larps that are inclusive of and welcoming to a range of genders and people who do not have genders.
Hi, I'm Lee, he, him, pronouns please. I would like to talk about cosplaying and non-binary play as a tool for individuals to explore their gender identity.
Yeah, welcome everybody. So yeah, let's start with the question that I think two of you mentioned you are very interested in exploring, which is so how has Larp played a role in your exploration of gender? Why don't we start with
Okay. How has Larp helped me explore my gender? I use Larp to explore a lot of questions about myself, spiritually, gender, sexuality, and for me, I cross-played a male character for 6 years before coming out as trans, or 6 months before coming out as trans, and so I played a male character first, and felt more comfortable in my skin and was able to honestly say to myself that I'm male. After being able to explore that in a Larp space that was a safe space for me to explore that in, and a place that was welcoming and open to people being able to cosplay and explore in that space. So it's definitely helped to shape my gender identity.
There's a lot of pieces here. I, for a long time before I was questioning identity at all, I had already said that it was felt about as crosscast to play as a high femme woman as it did to play as a cis man. And as someone who does not have an internal gender identity, but does have what I refer to as a gender political affiliation, having had opportunities to play a range of genders in LARP has been nice in a lot of ways, including sort of affirming that if this doesn't matter, if none of these feel much better or worse, maybe this is a real thing. Maybe this is actually okay. But the most impactful for me was not actually quite about gender identity. Because while I don't have a gender identity, I do have a gender expression because I live in this world. And my default gender expression is basically butch woman. That's what I'm usually perceived as, and I don't have a problem with that. And at JAL, for the first time ever, I got to play someone who was explicitly written as a butch woman. And that let me understand in my gut and emotions rather than in my head the importance of representation, because it had never mattered to me personally, and that did. Definition.
Yeah, can we just, you guys forget what JAL is?
Oh, thank you. My apologies, JAL. JAL is just a little loving. It is a game about the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. And I'm the person on the panel who actually played it, although the rest of the audience. It's been a big impact for a lot of us who played it.
So my experiences with exploring my identity often came more in LARP adjacent communities than in the actual LARPs themselves. I spent a lot of my adolescent years in LARP communities where I felt very comfortable trying to figure out what on earth my gender was. I knew from the time I was a child I was not a boy or a girl. Like I was that kid in elementary school who, when we had to line up, it would be like, all right, boys over there, girls over there, and Ben, all right, you can stay in the middle, sure. I went to a really hippie elementary school where they let me get away with that. Like, fourth grade. And then in my adolescent years, I was kind of figuring out what on earth that meant. But in LARPs, I could get away from that. I could play characters where my gender didn't matter. And so most of my characters in my adolescent LARPs were not gendered, and I didn't think about the genders of the characters very much because I didn't have to. You know, I could play characters that were defined by whether or not they had magic, by whether or not, you know, they were saving the world or destroying it, and the gender was not irrelevant. And that was the really freeing part, that it was like, yes, I don't have to have a gender. And that then sort of became my gender identity of like, oh wait, I don't have to have one of those? I can just keep going, no thank you, when a gender question comes up. Eventually in college, I discovered that there was a word for this called agender, and I was like, oh, yay! That's so nice. But so LARP being this sort of this created space where genders didn't have to matter. Not to say that it doesn't matter, but that it didn't have to, was really significant for me. And then in much more recent years, as in like last year, I started experimenting more with presentation, because for a long time my defaulted presentation, like I tried to be fairly androgynous. I had hair down my butt, and it was not until fairly like a couple years ago that I was comfortable having short hair and presenting in a way that like read as much more traditionally masculine and so on. But I really wanted to push back against that. And then last year I finally played a character who wore skirts for a while, and I was like, oh, this is great. Why did I trap my legs in pants for so long? I love this. And that just gave me a really good excuse, because I was playing this character the whole week. So I was like, I guess I gotta go to Goodwill and get a whole bunch of skirts. Oh no, I guess I'm gonna keep these after this LARP. And that was great. And skirts were very good, and now I have a bunch of them. Give me your own skirts. Do not wear skirts anymore. I can do with more skirts throughout the summer.
So, simply, I actually knew when I was a child that I wasn't a girl. I was very clear about that, and I feel like most of my life has been people gaslighting me about my gender identity and not letting me be who I am. And a lot of times I just would like not think about it, or I had people projecting other assumptions on me. Well, you say you're not a girl, so obviously you're going to be a lesbian when you grow up. Sexuality and gender are not the same thing, first of all. But, so there was a lot of that, and I didn't think about gender when I was writing characters but I was always playing characters who were torn between two worlds, trying to explain sides to each other whenever I designed something. I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing that. Why am I doing that? And like, even in college, I had gone around and told people I wasn't a woman, I wasn't a girl, I was just a kid. But people were like, that's not a thing. So, different time period. So it was once again having gender forced upon me. I do have a sense of gender, I'm not agender, but I'm not necessarily, like, people tend to talk about a straight line between them, and that's not accurate either for me. And really in LARPs, whenever I would get cast, they would cast me in roles that were coded as female, they were pre-written characters, but I would be the gender non-conforming female character a lot in LARPs. I would always be your pirate queen. And consistently, I had an entire intercom for every single character I was in. It was a pirate who was secretly a princess, or a princess who was secretly a pirate. And like, it was an entire weekend of this, but it was also when I felt most comfortable, and I am really comfortable in gender bending clothing normally. And LARP has kind of let me explore some of that more, but also I have a lot of fear about going to the extremes of presentation in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I want to play more in more male-dominated roles, but because I feel like I barely think female, I'm afraid to do it. But I'm also afraid I'm gonna like it too much. So I'm in that weird, yeah.
Geez. For me, initially, it was more the LARP community that helped me. If I cry, it's because I'm exhausted. Sorry. I had never been a part of a community before where I felt safe. I grew up in very small town Oregon, and most people think of Oregon as Portland. I swear to you, the rest of the state is the entirety of it. Don't be fooled. So having a community in which when people asked me, are you a boy or a girl, I could actually ignore the question was amazing. It did take me probably about 1.5 years of being part of the community before I played characters other than female. And part of that was because the few times I was casted instead of chosen character, I was typecasted as prostitutes. Because big boobs. They want people to stare at those, apparently. I will say that since then, having played various genders, the most gender euphoric character I have played so far was actually a trans man. Even though I myself am not a man, it was amazing to have a weekend where I only got misgendered 4 times.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
It was fantastic. I was like, everyone is using him. I had there was only 3 people that did it. 2 of them I corrected once, the other one I corrected twice, and by the end of the weekend she was my character's girlfriend. So, you know,
It's actually wonderfully reaffirming to be properly gendered in LARPing spaces.
yes.
And I don't think people who don't experience this understand how much it knocks you down when you're misgendered.
Yeah.
Personally, I have a customer-facing retail job. I'm a retail manager in Texas, and everything is aggressively gendered in Texas. Everybody is man or woman. Everyone. And so I can't count the number of times a day in work where I misgendered. My employees, they're fine. They get it right. But I have an older Texas customer base, and every customer.
I can tell you the state doesn't matter.
Yes.
I live in Seattle, and I still cannot even get a single one of my coworkers to stop calling me a girl.
So when we were talking about planning for this panel, we were also talking about the experience of, and this goes with the being presuming well-meaningness in this room anyway. We were talking about our own experiences of having misgendered people and how there are good ways to be able to productively learn from that experience. And so we actually were thinking about doing a very short sort of demonstration of what that might look like. Would you mind doing that?
Right. Okay. You have no pronoun preference. Would you like to pick one for the sake of this role play?
I'll go with he.
All right, he.
Hi, I'm Susan. My pronouns are he.
All right, thank you. All right. So it's nice to meet you. Interesting conversation. Oh, she's from Boston.
I use he them pronouns.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. He's from Boston. Two sentences. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Please don't make it big.
Make it about you. I'm really so good about, social justice. I'm your ally. Have you met my POC queer friend? And then you start talking about your gay partner, and I'm just like, this is not relevant. Please stop.
Right.
We've heard it before.
Yeah, performative allyship.
And also like the thing that also came up at the same time is we misgender ourselves. Like as non-binary people, it happens. It happens. We don't instantly hate you because you misgendered us once. As long as you apologize and correct yourself and then move on, we're probably not going to hold it against you too bad. If you keep doing it over and over again, then we're going to get grumpy. But like, we misgender ourselves. We slip up. We're human.
Please
Well,
do not.
Speech that, well, they is so hard, and that's not the problem.
I just want to quickly ask, do we actually have any cis folk in the audience? Thank you for coming.
Thank you for being here.
I was just seeing a continuous amount of nods, and I was like preaching to the choir right now.
I heard a couple different versions of cis.
Not trans.
That is not accurate either.
No, I
Cis.
strongly disagree with that.
I actually wrote a definition in our document. Cis means you 100% identify as the gender that was assigned to you at birth.
No,
You can be non-cis without being trans.
That's true. It comes from the not trans, but I'm not sure I would. You clearly identify as the gender assigned at birth, because I don't think 100% is a really complicated thing.
And
That might make no one cis.
And they all have different values or strengths of gender.
yes. I would say that, like, if you more or less identify with how you were assigned at birth.
Also, to be clear, I think this is a category that is going to change in the future. This is a rapidly evolving category because it is generally used to mean not trans or non-binary. But as we move into future generations where we are starting to get children raised without being arbitrarily gendered from birth by wonderful parents who may or may not be sitting on this very panel, we are going to reach an era where we will have many folk who have been non-binary since birth. And therefore, that form of definition, that form of distinction is not going to be useful. And there will be other terms that will emerge. And these are the terms that we currently have, but they will
Which is
evolve.
another reason why it is so broad, right? Because it is such it is an ever evolving and changing space because it's still so not normalized, unfortunately. Sure. Brief point.
The best way I've seen misgendering handled in a game was the game I play in the most often has a misgender tax, where it is not a law in the town, it is a casual, like, social thing that is agreed upon by the players, that if you misgender someone, you owe them a currency. And it's fun because people get in on it and will correct other people and say, oh, you owe so-and-so a currency because you've misgendered them, and it helps to reinforce pronouns.
I also want to just add with definitions that there are differences in different regions and communities, and even how words and pronouns are used, because we were
I'm
talking.
from the West Coast.
Yeah. Yes. And they, as far as I'm used to, doesn't necessarily mean you're anywhere on the gender spectrum, whereas I gather in your community is.
Yeah, so we were talking about what to use as a default when you don't know somebody's gender. And in most places, people say, oh, use they, them as a default. And in other spaces, they, them is still considered a gendered pronoun because it is gender neutral. And there are people that don't identify as that either. So then there's a lot of spaces where we're like, no, please just use names as a default. It's a very regional thing.
They linguistically is okay if it's indefinite, but if you're using an indefinite sense without knowing the person's pronoun, that's where it's problematic.
Yeah.
So, to kind of get us back on. Not that this isn't a productive conversation, it's just, this is also a LARP conference, so we want to talk about.
Yes.
But so we talked about like ways that LARP can help one explore gender, but obviously some LARPs are better at that than others. So what are some ways that LARPs can be written and facilitated to create, I won't say a safe space, but like a safer space for people who can't or haven't felt comfortable expressing their gender. Oh, what did you?
No, I was just going to respond. You know.
Oh yeah.
Start.
Keep doing the one finger thing and be as.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Sorry. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I would say
And
that.
maybe we'll do the kit and then
Yeah.
background.
I would say make sure that you have non-binary, agender, other representation in your backgrounds and your stories if you give those to people. And again, just use different pronouns or something. Don't make a big deal about it, but even having some acknowledgement that it exists gives permission and normalizes.
I'll use an example. I have a roommate who creates LARPs, and at some point after I finished one of the many Star Trek series, I was just ranting at him about how my #1 complaint of sci-fi is that all of our alien species are still binary. The one time we had a species that wasn't, it was done very poorly, and I could rant about that for hours. And my roommate heard that conversation and actually went and created a whole species for his sci-fi LARP that does not have gender. And like he didn't make a huge deal about it. It's like, they're just here in our game now. This is part of our lore. Accept it. And that was kind of amazing to actually like go back to LARPing after having a child and show up, and there'd be these aliens that just don't have gender. Like, oh, cool. Do the thing. Make them part of your world. We play mostly fantasy and sci-fi. Why are we still playing binaries?
Not just fantasy and sci-fi, excuse me. So, exactly what, yes, and make sure that also there are human non-binary characters.
Yeah.
Because I grudgingly acknowledge that I am human, despite the fact that I spend most of my life identifying primarily with robots and monsters and aliens, because those are the only examples of non-binariness I ever get to see. So please, yes, give us those delicious non-binary aliens. I love them. I want to be them. But also acknowledge that there are non-binary humans. As part of, then sort of outside of your world things, because I think you heard all the stuff I was going to say. You probably heard yesterday morning in the keynote about luxury gay-based communism. But another really great thing that we like to do in terms of facilitating, and this is especially if you're facilitating anything with kids, as we do with a lot of young people, or anything that is multi-day or installment-based. There's a particular language that I found that I really find very helpful, which is when you're asking people to introduce themselves at the beginning of an event. When everyone is circled up, if you are in a community where this is a thing that happens, and if it's not, I encourage you to do it. Get all your players to circle up and before any game starts and introduce themselves to one another, just as we did here, and introduce themselves with their names and the pronouns they would like to go by for this event. Not what pronouns do you go by, but what pronouns would you like to go by for this event. Specifically invite that space of it might be different from what they go by in the outside world for one reason or another. And also acknowledge that it might change during the event. And I spent a lot of time running camps, and this is the thing I noticed that at day camps, especially with younger kids, we would first explain, what does that mean? What do going by pronouns mean? What are pronouns? And you'd always get, a couple like 8-year-olds being like, that's an option? I mean, what? A couple of them will try on, like, yeah, well, okay, I'm gonna try using a different pronoun today. And then, maybe like Tuesday, Wednesday, they'll be like, no, you know what, this was an interesting experiment, but I'm gonna go back to the other pronouns I was using. And then, like, every couple of weeks, you get a kid come in on Thursday and be like, I really like going by this different pronoun. Can you help me talk to my parents about this when they take me? Unfortunately, these camps were in like Berkeley and upstate New York, so conversations usually went really well. But like, give people the opportunity to try on pronouns temporarily, to change what they're using in their default lives, and use language that allows for that and invites it.
Yeah, that seems like a really good idea.
Yeah.
Pronouns too.
So I think that writing non-binary characters explicitly into worlds when there's gender at all is great. A lot of the games that I write, we write with player-defined gender to give people maximum flexibility on characters, because that's not the thing we happen to be, that's not a thing we're particularly interested in our game about the world ending and time travel. It's just not what we're doing right here. But if you're doing that sort of thing, if you are running games that have name badges, like a lot of these pre-written one-shots do, making sure that there is a space on the name badge for people to fill in the pronouns that they are using for that character, which once again may or may not be the pronouns that they go by in day-to-day life. Doesn't matter. Make there be a space on the name badge. It's really, really easy.
As a designer, I actually have internally conflicted views on the answer to this question. As a writer, I feel like as a default, having player-defined gender is addressing the problem by not addressing the problem, and that if gender needs to be defined, it is important to have representation, and that representation is the way that we can normalize things outside of Larp circles by also making it ubiquitous in our Larp circles. So have I written Larps where like it's player-defined gender? Yes. I would like to write more Larps where I can, even if gender isn't a main part of the play, I still think that representation is important.
Yeah.
So like I'm conflicted because I can see the like, yeah, player-defined gender is great because then everybody can use whatever they please, but you're not always going to be able to expose people to non-binary, to they, to neo-pronouns. You're not able to expose them to that in a lot of Larp circles. I know in my Larp circle, it's very few and far between, but I wish that there were more representation.
To be clear, I think it is super important that both exist.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
there's different purposes. Like I as a designer, I'm like internally torn between what the answer to the question is. Like,
It also vastly depends on what type of work you're running.
Yeah.
I mostly play weekend-long events with 100+ PCs and like 20 to 30 NPCs. So the spaces that I exist in are very different from most of the spaces I hear people talking about here. And I'm like, that doesn't relate. I don't understand what you're saying right now.
and that's okay. Yeah, like I'm glad that we're all from very different areas and backgrounds.
I also like in campaign games, if you have the option of putting, pronoun pins on, use them, be consistent, label. But also if you're coming out and doing an NPC character, have them introduce themselves in game with their pronouns. Because as an authority figure in that game, as an NPC, you're actually normalizing that behavior.
So let's talk
more about the concept of cross-casting and cross-playing, and where does that fit in the non-binary experience, the non-binary framework? Yeah.
So about a year ago, I was asked to portray a female character. And normally I don't have a problem with theater background, ability to costume, like I can do it, but I had an anxiety attack just by putting on a costume. And had to back out of a situation in which I was asked to play a face NPC for an organization that I really respect because they had, and I thought normally I'm okay, but at that point, that was so uncomfortable for me, and I couldn't do it. I had an anxiety attack. I had to. Well, I felt like I, failed it because my friends asked me. I recognized though that when you have said, this is my gender identity, that it's vulnerable, and that the crossplay that is positive, like I'm like playing a male character and realizing, hey, I'm male, like that's a good way. But when you're being cast and you're cast as something that is outside of your identity to the point where it's foreign and uncomfortable and causes an anxiety attack, that is something that we as organizers need to be very cognizant of, because I'm certain that I'm not the only person that that's happening to. Yeah.
I definitely would go with the this is something where respecting players' wishes is absolutely vital. If someone generally presents as female and usually plays female characters and puts on this Larp, I really want to play a male character, that should be respected. And at the same time, if someone says, don't ever make me play a male character, that is terrible for me, that is extremely unpleasant and anxiety invoking, and don't ever make me do it, obviously, that's okay too. Respecting what people want. The hard part is, of course, if you are a player where sometimes this is okay and sometimes this is not okay, and you don't know what the answer is going to be on the day, that's a really hard thing for everybody involved to deal with. And I'm not saying you shouldn't push your boundaries if that's something you want to do. And I don't know how to deal with that. That's just a hard issue.
For me, I know definitely it's not something I do a lot of, because I think it is something that I get self-conscious about, because I have a strong feeling that as someone who tends to, who is assigned male at birth and tends to present somewhat like slightly masculine of center, that people will not take me seriously if I'm playing female characters. I have done it, but I often have this intense self-consciousness that the character will be defined by this. That the character will be defined as, oh, it's Books playing a woman, not, this character is a wizard who does blah, 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 whatever. And that is very anxiety-inducing, not because of any internal gender dysphoria, but just because it feels like such a strong distraction. That it feels like it will overshadow whatever else I'm trying to do with the character, so it's just not worth trying. So I extremely rarely do it. Whereas I don't have that fear of playing male characters. I've played plenty of male characters and had it be a relative non-issue because people tend to, by default, perceive me as male. So it's not distracting to them, and it's not like breaking out of any norms.
My spouse tends to put on gender questions. I don't have an internal gender identity. I do have facial hair.
Right.
And I think that also kind of plays into the idea of imposter syndrome too, which is a huge, huge complicated thing. But I know even if I'm wearing male clothing, I will have people project female, she pronouns on me. And clothing isn't gendered, but or it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Like I'm wearing a dress. This is not a female dress, a girl's dress, because I am not a girl. But I understand people and will think that way. I keep having a problem actually in my LARPs, which is a little bit of a diversion, where I will go into a LARP and people will assume that my gender is she, her in a game, even though they know I go by they, their, no matter what I am wearing. Or they'll ask me if it's okay if they use she or ask me my pronouns. And it's like, really, come on, they have this sort of like, don't be a bother, don't be a burden, sort of, and I don't think they realize what they're doing. I don't know how to address it. I have anxiety about presenting as male and Larp for similar reasons I don't think I'll pass, which is a horrible concept of passing as well. And I have an extreme anxiety about going really hard femme. And there was about a couple of years ago, where I was actually trying to run from my gender. And I was going overly high femme. You can find pictures on my Facebook of me with big hair and like extreme presentation because I was trying to deny it, even though I had known it all my life. And that brings up trauma from that to me. So I think I just always want to play gender non-conforming characters no matter what they are, gender-wise.
Yeah.
Books. There's this wonderfully awful thing that a lot of people don't talk about, and it's called transmisogyny.
Yeah.
So I tend to really hate the terms AMAB and AFAB and tend to prefer to use TMA and TME, transmisogyny affected and transmisogyny exempt. Personally, because I feel like it is a stronger issue. A lot of our transmisogyny affected non-binary people specifically have a really hard time still existing in non-binary spaces because they are designed for people that are skinny white AFABs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could go on a rant about this forever, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
think so.
Don't apologize. Yeah.
So, this is why a lot of non-binary people who were assigned male at birth feel very uncomfortable with playing females, whereas a lot of non-binary people that were assigned female at birth are like, yeah, I can play male characters, this is no big deal. Because we were usually given more of the space to do that as children.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But some of that comes when we are socialized that as someone who was assigned female at birth, it is a sign of leadership qualities to take on male characteristics, whereas if you are assigned male at birth and take on female characteristics, you are weak in a number of other slurs that I'm not going to say out loud.
Yeah.
There is something called masculine privilege that is somewhat separate from male privilege. Someone who is perceived as a woman can still get a fair amount of masculine privilege by acting in the masculine endorsed ways. Someone who is perceived as male can lose a lot of masculine privilege and be punished very heavily for it if they don't subscribe to those norms.
Toxic masculinity is hell. It's my song and dance.
Personally, I don't actually like the term cross-casting.
Agreed.
I don't feel either.
I would like a
That's why
better.
I was like, how does it even fit in the non-binary?
I don't like it.
Yeah. I don't like the term. I wish there was a better term for it, but
Miscasting, maybe.
It could be conscious choice.
Yeah, it could be a conscious choice.
Yeah, you can opt into it.
I wish there was a better word for that. We should find a better word for that.
Like, yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that. Put it on the list.
I sometimes feel like when I put into the wrong gender role thing, it's like I'm wearing an itchy, uncomfortable sweater that's too tight, but I'm used to it's there, but it's not that bad, and I keep telling myself it's not that bad, but for them, I just want to take the sweater off.
But also, I do want to acknowledge that there are some people, like I have, I'm thinking of one in particular, who is a trans-masked non-binary person, but who has recently been playing very high femme characters and has found it very liberatory and very healthy for them, sort of re-engaging with that aspect of presentation, that now that they are comfortable enough in their masculine identity to then now re-engage with that side of presentation. So I want to acknowledge that for some people, certainly not for everyone, it can be a very powerful experience. It can be very healing.
One of the other things I wanted to touch on from a Larp perspective is that one of the other reasons that representation is important is that people should have the opportunity to even get a glimpse of experiencing what it is to be different than what they normally identify as. And then clearly it's not the same experience, and it's very surface. And like we can help to guide them and help them to be respectful in portraying non-binary and opposite gender roles. But I think that those opportunities need to exist. Yes, like
Can we really just never use the word opposite gender ever?
yeah. Alternate gender, but yes. But I think that those experiences need to be available.
Well, I think it's also how a lot of people figure out things about their gender, even if it's just reaffirming what they thought they
Exactly.
were.
Yeah, I think that's why I think that those experiences need to exist.
I'm happy for people to play things that they aren't, to explore that space, in part because so many people I know realize more about themselves in the process.
So, yeah, the thing that I'm interested in is the question that Kit brought up in the pre-planning, which is like the idea of how the in-game makeup relates, in the in-game makeup of gender ratios relate to the gender ratios in the out-of-game community. Like that, I feel like is a big part of this in terms of just how the level of exploration that we can do in-game, you know? Yeah.
So this is something that I feel very passionate about, as I do with a lot of things. Because in my local community, we have a ridiculous amount of non-binary players and very, very few non-binary characters. Because everyone still feels safer playing binary characters because that is what the norm is in the game.
Yeah.
So at some point,
There's so much to unpack.
at some point, I then took it upon myself to create an aggressively trans non-binary character that refused to interact with anyone that did not give them pronouns first.
Yeah, I love that.
My character, like anytime somebody tried to talk to me, I would specifically be like, "What is your name and who are you?" And if they did not give me pronouns or a gender to identify them as, I would not give them my name. I would walk away from the conversation.
No acceptable or none?
If somebody came up with that, most people would respond with, "I guess I use he, him, I think." What do you mean you think? You don't know who you are? You haven't thought about it before? Because I played an elf character. I've lived hundreds of years. How have you never sat and thought about yourself? Yeah, so it did eventually lead to other non-binary players realizing that it is okay and safe in our community to play non-binary characters. It also led to a few cis people deciding that they don't want to be a part of the community, and I was okay with that.
You know, I have a big problem with people taking up the space they need, so I'm gonna leave. Little shady.
Well, I love the fact that you did that because it empowered other people.
So I've observed, go down.
No, go for it.
So I've observed a trend, and this is now something that I acknowledge is a very scary subject for many of us because it is something that we are accused of very often by people who hate us and want us dead. But let's be real, being queer is contagious, all right? When you expose your children to us, they are more likely to become us. It's true. All the dark fears and conservatives, it's honestly true. Because now, is it true that we are actually warping their minds? No. It is because we are exposing them to possibilities and they are acknowledging what they were all along, and they suddenly have the terminology and freedom to acknowledge it. So
The all along narrative can go die in a fire.
yes.
But
that they are acknowledging possibilities of what they may be and may become and may have been.
Well, I will say too, if you've ever seen someone discover a term that is them that they didn't know, and they discover they're not broken, because a lot of them think that, and I've seen this in so many communities. I mean, I've seen it with my friends who are asexual, I've seen it with my friends in multiple types of trans communities, all these different gender and other identities.
Yes, bisexual.
It's like I have observed in my Larp communities, like so at the summer camp that I've been at for a very long time, when I was first trying to figure out my gender identity and come out as non-binary, I was the only one doing that. I didn't have other non-binary community members that I knew of that I could talk to, and these conversations were very difficult. I sure had met lots of people. Not a lot of people had useful things to offer except hugs, which were useful and appreciated, but not very productive. Now, I go to camp and, oh boy, it's a real queer camp, y'all. So many of our children are trans and non-binary at these camps now because these things have spread, and as the conversations have spread and it's become more comfortable, and now we've reached a stage where many of the counselors and staff are non-binary, and these young community members have visible models to look up to and go like, oh, that is a potential option. That is something I can grow up to be. And that was a big part of what prompted me to start using they them pronouns more actively, because long after I knew that that was an option, I was still like, oh, whatever, pronouns don't matter to me. I don't care. You can use, he, him, sure, that's fine. And then I sort of had that moment where I realized, which is fine for people who pronouns don't matter to, cool, that's awesome. But for me, I had this moment where I was like, I'm working with lots of children. I see hundreds of children every summer. And if I had one non-binary adult as a child that I knew was non-binary, it would have made a world of difference. I gotta be that. And so I spent a summer insisting for the first time that people actually use they them for me at camp. And it made a world of difference. And suddenly I had these kids having these conversations with me. And then it was after that summer, suddenly going back to not being in camp and having people use he, him for me. It had never bothered me before. But suddenly after a summer without it. Anyway, my pronouns are they them. Thank you. But yeah, this thing spread through communities.
I was going to say, on that point about, like, being a responsible member of the community, I am an incredibly vocal member of our local Larp community. And the number of people who have trusted me and come out to me privately and asked me their advice and told me their stories in confidence is overwhelming. And also, so please support those people in your community, even if you're not that person. Please give support to people like that are on this panel with me as well, because when you are vocal and active about these issues, people will come see you sort of like an adult, like, oh, I can go up to that. It's a very similar thing, even with other adults, and say, you know what, I didn't know that, I was non-binary. I didn't know that I was trans. And I was trans.
This is actually a point I raised to a lot of my queer friends who are in relationships that from the outside look cishet. And they ask me, should I still tell people my actual identity? The answer will always be yes, because you don't know who needs that in their life.
Yes.
If you are in a safe enough space to be out, be out.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do briefly also just want to acknowledge very quickly, it's okay if you don't want to be that queer person, because it's also, it is a fair amount of emotional labor. It can be very intense.
Yeah.
To be that super visible support person, it is totally valid to opt out of being that point of ultra visibility, especially if you're not in a wider community.
So, we're getting towards question time, but I just want to have you all talk a little bit on imposters. You brought it up, and it's just so
It's
important
such a
to
pain.
the non-binary experience. What did you need, and how can we as a Larp community help combat imposter syndrome in the non-binary?
So, I think imposter syndrome is for me, and this is not everyone's experience. We all have different genders up here, in different ways, even if you fall under vaguely the same terminology. I know that I sit down sometimes and I'm like, am I trans enough? Am I trans enough? And I'm like, a friend of mine who's a binary trans guy was like, Kim, if you're thinking that question, if you're trans, please stop. And the thing is, because I know that from the outside, I hate this term. I hate passing terms in general. They're problematic, but I am cis passing, which means people can project cisness, and then I am, female on me. And I don't often dress whatever people are supposed to dress like when they're non-binary, which I think is how we're dressed right now.
They're supposed to dress like.
Yeah, like the entire gender clothing thing gets confusing, but because I don't look like a skinny David Bowie elf.
Reference to a panel yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes feel like I'm not good enough. I don't know. So,
Well, you are.
thank you.
And everyone in this room is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you're having that, am I queer enough? Am I trans enough? Am I whatever enough? You aren't.
Yeah, and the.
I would like to tell a brief story about imposter syndrome, if I have time.
Yes.
So when this was first being put together, I was not actually asked to be on any panels about queer anything, despite the fact that I've written a bunch of queer games, and I was kind of upset about this, and I talked to some of my friends, and they said, like, reach out, talk to them, ask. And I screwed my courage together, and I did. And the guy, well, okay, here's this queer one, and I'd also listed this as a possibility, and then I got asked, well, and we want that to be an entirely non-binary panel. Are you non-binary? And I immediately got this, oh God, am I non-binary? I have to be on this panel. What am I doing? I just forced myself into a place I don't belong. That was terrifying. Like, and I am pretty out. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Questions from the audience?
I guess piggybacking on that last, Kim, I am someone who, I am a man who identifies, a trans man, but I do identify as binary, even though binary is garbage and ultimately should destroy it.
Yeah.
It's that I identify as binary. How do we, as trans people who identify within the binary, help our fellow constellations?
Thank you for
Which,
that question.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me just quickly say, in my world, I like the term instead of spectrum, we're constellations, because
That's beautiful.
I was queer body have celestial bodies. So.
Yes, that's beautiful.
That's like my favorite thing. What's your name?
I'm Aaron.
Aaron.
Awesome.
Gender constellation.
So I love that, and I love the fact that you asked that question. I'm not sure, but correct pronouns, obviously, same thing. I know that I personally get more pissed off when people mess up my friends' pronouns than when they mess up mine, which is probably a weird control I can take it thing, but also I'm protective of my friends. But probably ask individuals in particular, it's gonna vary.
On that point of pronouns, the healthiest way to handle it is we have a pay it forward 5 rule in my circle. If you misgender someone, you correct it 5 times so that the emotional labor on the person isn't always on their shoulders to correct the pronouns. So if you misgender someone, correct other people 5 times. So that it's not always on that person to correct the pronouns.
I don't know which one's
You
going
go.
to raise your hands first.
I have a story I'd like to share that resonates with the stories I've been hearing.
Can we do a question?
Yeah.
Please,
do a question.
please.
Yeah.
So I understand there might be a lot of different answers, and I've talked with some of you about this before, but for you, what does a non-binary space look like?
Oh, wow. So, I ran a non-binary meetup at InterCon 2 years ago when I was con chair. We were going to run one last year, but I overscheduled myself. I like having spaces where people can explicitly get together to talk, and that's not exactly what you're saying, but I like making a place and a time and a space for people with similar identities to join up and meet because that helps. It's not everywhere, but I also realized after I left the convention that I felt less safe when I wasn't around people who understood my gender identity. So I guess the non-binary safe space is somewhere where my gender identity is in question.
Can't be more gonna say something. Or not.
No, I was.
I'm sorry.
Non-binary spaces are extremely hard to define because in my brain, secretly everyone is some variation. Because I don't believe that there is actually any two people in the world that have the same exact gender. So I personally feel like non-binary spaces are spaces in which people do not use gender terms to describe the group as a whole.
I agree. I sort of come back to what I was saying at the beginning, that a big part of why I love LARP as a space of exploration for me was that LARP was a space where gender didn't have to be relevant. And so to me, that's what feels like a non-binary space, is a space where we can kind of leave gendered expectations at the door as best we are capable, acknowledging that we are all products of a patriarchal society. But as best we are capable of dismantling that in enclosed spaces and creating spaces where gender doesn't have to be as relevant, I think is very important. And also I want to extend an invitation, now that I suddenly remember this exists. There's a Facebook group called Larpers Beyond the Binary that I admin that came out of a panel, or a group much like this one at KnitCon this year, and y'all should join it and join the lovely conversation.
I think that a non-binary space, to me, is also a place where gender doesn't have to matter, but that it is okay to have places that are exclusive to a group, because sometimes we need that. Like, it is okay to be exclusive. Like, yeah, go ahead. I'm being emotional, so.
No, I was just going to add to that. I also admin a group that is specifically for non-binary people, and my one requirement to get into the group is that when I ask, are you non-binary, you say yes. That's it. That's all that's gotta happen. If you say no, then you can't be in the group. I'm not going to police exactly what your non-binary flavor looks like.
What if you say I don't know?
They're I don't knows are also accepted because that questioning is always welcome in my spaces.
I had a related comment about creating safe non-binary spaces and environment.
Oh, yeah, that would be
In
excellent.
an actual way. So one of the ways that we assist people in decoupling gender, and one of the things they do is we don't use descriptors that are physical or cannot be helped by the person. So instead of saying it's that guy, that girl, that short person, that tall person, like whatever, we say, oh, that blacksmith, that person who killed that giant. Like achievements, titles, things like that in an in-character space makes it to where you can decouple the gender from a person and to help. That doesn't have to be an all the time thing, but it can help open the door to create safer spaces where gender doesn't have to matter.
That also helps with visibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have anything to ask?
Cool.
At Joel, just a little while last summer, there was a moment. It'll be clearer if I first say, I've basically stopped publicly playing male characters for reasons similar, resonate with what you said about playing female characters. Basically, it got to, I didn't want to give other people at the table or in the game an excuse to misgender me. And I remember putting on my character badge for the character that had been assigned for Jaw for the first time at the start of the week, and having a visceral revulsion roll over me as I realized I could not play Marcus. And I went to the organizers and said, this is changing. I don't think I asked. I just said it's varsity now. And so I played varsity. And I found it very empowering that the organizers were receptive, but the real empowerment was inside me all along. Because I just claimed it. I just said, this is this character. So this character is, and this is why this character had all of this bullshit trans-misogynist and transphobic attitudes towards their best friend, who was a trans man. It was written in their character sheet, they had transphobic attitudes, and I was like, well, so now I'm trans too, cool.
Transphobic, it's real.
Yeah. And yeah, there's a story that I wanted to share, and I wanted to give a shout out to Event Horizon. There's this question about creating non-binary spaces. And this visual memory that I have of looking for the first time this year at the Clunk assignments, the dorm assignments, and seeing that there were even numbers of people assigned to the men's dorm, the women's dorm, and the gender-neutral non-binary dorm. I was like, yep, that's where I'm headed. Where I'm going to be playing the consciousness of a ship and having a human body. Exploring what it's like to be a person in a human body.
I know we're really close to out of time. I really want to express that everyone deserves the space they need. If I try to be great about that possible. I know it's hard, but everyone deserves a space they need.
Really fast. Would love to hear responses or response. Played in a very small informal Larp, and I got cast as somebody who was trans woman, and it was the thing that finally, after a lifetime of things where I spoke non-binary, that actually made my brain go from binary to non-binary, was because the other people they were really good about constantly misgendering. In game with the characters, just constantly referring to me as he. And it's just, because it wasn't that I felt punched, it was that I went, like, I'm questioning things and it broke it. And whether or not you think that's a good example of something that we can do in large spaces to kind of question that they were that super dangerous.
It's definitely super dangerous.
Content warnings all over.
If you want to build an entire LARP that is about the experience of being misgendered, and that is what the LARP is about, in a very carefully curated, safe context that people are specifically opting into that, then maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I add something
Sure,
to that
sure,
as well? On that topic, there's also a ton of problems in media right now with cis people getting cast to play trans characters.
Yeah.
So with that thing specifically, and I want to make sure that if that is ever done, it is done with that consciously in mind and things to avoid damaging people who have been harmed in that way continually.
Specifically, people of the wrong gender being casted as trans people. There is a ridiculous amount of cis men being casted as trans women.
Yeah.
Right.
I do think there's also, we should point out a big difference between casting people in a LARP where there's room for exploration and players are certainly not making any money off of it versus taking dollars out of the pockets of trans actors.
Yeah.
I've never been turned down for a role because I was trans. What are you talking about?
And exploration through roles is important. So
Yeah,
Do we have any concluding remarks?
Thank you guys for continuously doing the emotional labor of changing the minds and hearts of the world so that everybody coming after you has an easier road to tread.
Thank you all for being here.
will add my philosophy I'm trying to share with more and more people. You know better, now be better.
Yeah.
My problems.
Yeah,
That's a good message, that's a great message.
that's great.